The moment my daughter-in-law smiled and said, "Margaret, my entire family is coming for Christmas," I didn't think much of it until she added one more sentence. "Just 25 people." 25. She said it the way someone says a few friends. Then she sat down at my kitchen table and began listing them. Her sister, her cousins, her uncle flying in from Miami, children, spouses, everyone. And of course, she said it like it was obvious. "You'll handle everything, right? 3 turkeys, decorations, cooking, cleaning, serving. For 5 years, that had been my job. Margaret, make coffee. Margaret, cook dinner. Margaret, clean this. Margaret, fix that." And I had done it. Every single time. Because I thought keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. So I smiled. "Perfect," I told her. Her smile grew even wider. Then I said something she never expected to hear. "I'm going on vacation." Silence filled the kitchen. "You can cook? You can clean?" I picked up my coffee. "I'm not your servant." Her face went pale. But what Tiffany didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had discovered something hidden in my son's office. Something that was about to make her perfect Christmas collapse in front of her entire family. And when that doorbell rang, her world of lies began to fall apart. The woman in my kitchen. At 66 years old, I never expected to feel like a stranger in my own home. Yet somehow, that is exactly what had happened. It didn't change overnight. Things like that rarely do. They change slowly, quietly, almost politely. When my son Kevin married Tiffany 5 years earlier, I truly believed we would become a family. For a while, everything seemed fine. Then small things began appearing. "Margaret, could you help with dinner tonight?" Of course I could. "Margaret, could you tidy up before our friends arrive?" Naturally. But little requests have a way of becoming habits. And habits slowly become expectations. Soon Tiffany stopped asking. She simply assumed. If her friends came over, I cooked. If there was a party, I prepared everything. She hosted. I worked. The strange part was how invisible the work became. Guests would compliment Tiffany. "What a beautiful dinner. What a perfect evening." She would smile proudly, and I would quietly wash dishes in the kitchen. Some of you listening right now probably recognize that feeling. That quiet place where you tell yourself it's easier not to argue, where keeping the family together feels more important than being appreciated. I believed that for 5 years. Until the day Tiffany walked into my kitchen wearing a red dress and announced her wonderful Christmas surprise. And something inside me finally stopped cooperating. The announcement. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early December. Cold outside. Warm inside the kitchen. I was stirring soup when Tiffany walked in without knocking, the way she always did. Her heels clicked against the tile floor. She carried herself like someone arriving at a hotel where the staff already knew her order. "Margaret," she said brightly, "I have wonderful news." Whenever Tiffany said those words, I knew it meant extra work for someone else. Usually me. I kept stirring the soup. "Oh?" She sat down at the kitchen table and crossed her legs. "My entire family is coming here for Christmas." The spoon paused in my hand. "All of them?" I asked. "Yes." She smiled widely. "It's only 25 people." "Only?" Then she began listing them. Valeria, Evelyn, Marco, Uncle Alejandro flying from Miami. Children, spouses, even second cousins. "It's going to be perfect," she said happily. Then she leaned forward slightly. "We'll need 3 turkeys." I didn't say anything. "And your chocolate silk pie." Still silence. "Oh, and you'll decorate the house like last year." My family loved that. She finally asked the question that wasn't really a question. "You'll handle everything, right?" That was the moment 5 years of memories rose quietly inside my chest. And for the first time, I didn't say yes. The word perfect. I turned off the stove. Then I looked directly at Tiffany. For years, I had avoided doing that. Avoided confrontation, avoided tension, avoided the possibility that my son might choose his wife over me. But something changes when silence lasts too long. You begin to realize that peace without respect is simply another kind of loneliness. Perfect, I said calmly. Her smile grew. She thought I had agreed. Then I added the rest. It will be perfect for you. She nodded. Yes, exactly. Because I won't be here. The smile froze on her face. What? I'm going on vacation, I said. You and your family can cook and clean. I lifted my coffee cup. I am not your servant. For a moment, the kitchen felt like a photograph. No movement. No sound. Tiffany blinked slowly. I don't understand. Her voice sounded thinner now. I already invited everyone. That sounds like your responsibility, I replied. Her chair scraped loudly as she stood. This is ridiculous. Kevin won't allow this. I tilted my head slightly. Kevin can have any opinion he wants. Then I reminded her of something she seemed to forget often. But this is my house. Those 4 words landed heavier than anything else I had said. And the look in Tiffany's eyes told me something very important. For the first time in 5 years, she realized I might actually mean it. Kevin walks in. The front door opened just as Tiffany finished, saying Kevin wouldn't allow this. Keys dropped into the bowl near the hallway. Kevin stepped inside, looking tired after work, loosening his tie. Tiffany rushed toward him before he even had time to take off his coat. Kevin, she said urgently, your mother is being ridiculous. I stayed where I was, leaning calmly against the counter. Kevin walked into the kitchen a moment later, glancing between the two of us like someone entering the middle of an argument he didn't understand. Mom, he said carefully, Tiffany told me what happened. I nodded. And? He sighed the way people do when they think they're about to calm someone unreasonable. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic? The word landed heavier than he realized. Dramatic. 5 years of quiet work, suddenly reduced to a mood. I'm not being dramatic, I said quietly. I'm being clear. Tiffany folded her arms. Kevin, tell her we can't cancel Christmas. My family already bought plane tickets. Kevin looked at me again. Mom, you know Tiffany can't cook for 25 people. Why not? I asked calmly. She works. That answer hung in the air, as if my time somehow counted less. As I said before, I replied, you can hire a caterer. Kevin shook his head immediately. That costs thousands. I raised my eyebrow. And doing it myself costs nothing, right? Neither of them answered. And in that silence, I finally understood something important. For 5 years, I hadn't been helping. I had simply been convenient. The word respect. Kevin rubbed his forehead. Mom, please. It's just 1 week. After Christmas, everything goes back to normal. Normal. That word stayed in the kitchen like cold air. Their normal meant I cooked. Their normal meant I cleaned. Their normal meant I stayed invisible while Tiffany played the perfect hostess. No, I said gently. Things are not going back to normal. Tiffany scoffed loudly. So you're just abandoning us? No, I corrected her. I'm leaving you to handle the responsibilities you created. Kevin shifted uncomfortably. You know we can't afford a caterer right now. That caught my attention. Why not? Tiffany answered too quickly. We just put a deposit on a new apartment. I blinked. A new apartment? Kevin suddenly looked nervous. We were going to tell you after the holidays. Interesting. Plans about their future that apparently didn't include mentioning the woman whose house they were living in. But that conversation could wait, because something deeper needed to be said first. Kevin, I said quietly, for 5 years I cooked for your guests, cleaned after your parties, and organized every holiday. Neither of them spoke. That wasn't the problem. I paused. The problem was that neither of you ever once asked if I wanted to. Some of you listening right now understand that kind of moment. The moment when a person finally says a word that should have been said years earlier. Respect. If that word means something to you, this is where dignity is defended. Subscribe. And tell me something in the comments. Would you have stayed silent for 5 years? Or would you have walked away sooner? Because what happened next proves something very important. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner. It was about something much bigger. The secret I found. 3 months earlier, I had been cleaning Kevin's office. Not snooping, just helping. That's what I had always done. While organizing his papers, I noticed a folder that didn't belong with the rest of his work documents. Bank statements. At first, I assumed they were business papers. Then I saw Tiffany's name. Again, and again, and again. Large purchases. Luxury stores. Online orders. Thousands of dollars at a time. My stomach tightened. That night, after Kevin and Tiffany went to bed, I quietly returned to the office. I told myself I was only going to look for a moment. Instead, I stayed there for nearly 2 hours. Credit cards Kevin didn't know about. Personal loans. Balances that kept growing. More than $50,000 in debt. But the worst discovery wasn't the money. It was the emails. Messages between Tiffany and her friends explaining how she kept Kevin distracted so he wouldn't notice the spending. How she planned to convince him that selling the house would be a smart investment. My house. The house I had paid for over 30 years. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the dark thinking about something I had avoided for a long time. Sometimes silence doesn't protect a family. Sometimes it protects the wrong person. And that was the night I stopped being quiet. Quiet investigation. The morning after I discovered those documents, I did something I had never done before. I stopped assuming things would fix themselves. Instead, I called my lawyer. Robert Miller had helped me years earlier when my husband passed away. He was careful, discreet, and most importantly, he listened. When I showed him copies of the documents, he didn't look surprised. He looked concerned. "Margaret," he said gently, "this situation could become very complicated if you don't protect yourself." Protect myself. The words felt strange at first. For years, my focus had always been protecting the family. But Robert was right, so I began taking small steps. Quiet ones. First, I moved my savings into a new account. Not because I wanted to hide anything, but because financial boundaries sometimes protect relationships before they destroy them. Second, Robert explained something important about the house. Legally, the property belonged entirely to me. No one could sell it. No one could borrow against it, unless I allowed it. But there was still one more step I needed to take. A step that would eventually change everything. Because if Tiffany had been lying to Kevin, there was a good chance she had been lying to someone else too. And sometimes the truth reaches people much faster when it comes from their own family. The emails. The emails were polite. Very polite. That part was important. I wrote to 3 members of Tiffany's family. Her uncle Alejandro, her sister Valeria, and her brother-in-law Marco. Each message sounded concerned rather than accusatory. I explained that I had discovered some financial documents that worried me. I told them I feared Kevin might not understand the situation. Then I attached a few bank statements. Just enough to raise questions. Nothing more. Their replies arrived faster than I expected. Alejandro answered first. His message was short. "Mrs. Margaret, thank you for informing us. We will discuss this with Tiffany soon." Valeria's response came next. Longer. More direct. She asked for copies of additional documents. Marco simply wrote one sentence. "This changes things." And then something unexpected happened. None of them contacted Tiffany immediately. Instead, Alejandro wrote again. He suggested waiting until Christmas. Because everyone would already be gathering together. It would be easier to discuss things face to face. I stared at that message for a long time. Sometimes justice arrives loudly. Other times it arrives quietly and sits patiently at the dinner table. The plan. Back in the present, Kevin and Tiffany were still standing in my kitchen. They had no idea that 3 months of preparation already stood behind my decision. "Mom," Kevin said carefully, "where exactly are you going?" "To visit my sister in Miami," I replied. That part wasn't true. But sometimes the truth needs to arrive at the right moment. And when will you be back? Tiffany demanded. After New Year's? Her panic was starting to show now. My family arrives in 3 days. Yes, I said calmly. That's why I recommend planning carefully. Kevin tried one more time. Mom, please, at least tell us what we should cook. I looked at him. Really looked. My son, 32 years old. A good man in many ways, but a man who had stopped paying attention to the quiet work happening around him. Kevin, I said gently, food doesn't appear magically. Someone plans it. Someone shops for it. Someone spends days preparing it. The room went quiet. For the first time in years, he seemed to understand that. At least a little. But the real lesson had not even begun yet. Because the morning I left the house, Tiffany was still asleep, and she had no idea what kind of Christmas was waiting for her. The morning I left. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. The house was completely quiet. For a moment I simply sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the silence. It felt different that morning, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had finally exhaled. I showered, dressed, and began packing my suitcase. Each folded shirt felt like a small declaration of independence. Downstairs, Kevin and Tiffany were still asleep. Their bedroom door was closed, and I could hear faint breathing from the hallway. For years, my mornings had started differently. Coffee brewing, breakfast cooking, someone calling my name from the living room. Margaret, could you bring the sugar? Margaret, where are the napkins? That morning, no one asked for anything. Before leaving, I placed a short note on the kitchen table. Have decided to leave early for my trip. The house is in your hands. Enjoy your Christmas. Margaret. But there were a few other things I quietly took care of. I emptied the refrigerator. I cleared the pantry. After all, groceries don't magically appear in a house. Someone always has to buy them. I also locked my good dishes and holiday decorations in my bedroom closet. If Tiffany wanted a perfect Christmas for 25 guests, she could create it herself. At exactly 7 o'clock, the taxi arrived. As the driver placed my suitcase in the trunk, I looked back at the house where I had lived for 30 years. For a long time, it had felt like a place where I worked, but that morning it felt like something else again. Home. The first phone call. The hotel suite overlooked the ocean. I had booked it weeks earlier, though no one knew that yet. For the first time in years, there was no one asking for coffee. No one expecting breakfast. I ordered eggs Benedict and sat on the balcony watching the waves roll slowly toward the shore. My phone started ringing at 10:47 a.m. Kevin. Of course. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom, where are you? He asked immediately. On vacation, I said calmly. But you left early. We found your note. I thought it would give you more time to prepare. There was shouting in the background. Tiffany. Even through the phone, I could hear the panic rising in her voice. Mom, Kevin continued carefully, Tiffany's family arrives in 2 days. Yes, I know. We don't even know where to start. I leaned back in the chair. Kevin, I said gently, you are 32 years old. Tiffany is 29. You are both fully capable adults. Silence. Then Tiffany's voice suddenly appeared on the phone. Margaret, please, I don't know how to cook for 25 people. That sentence hung there like a quiet confession. 5 years. And she had never once needed to learn. The family arrives. The real chaos began the next morning. I woke up slowly, enjoying the quiet hotel room, and checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Kevin. 31 from Tiffany. Several voice messages. The first one was Kevin. Mom, please call us back. The grocery store is closed and Tiffany's family arrives in an hour. The second message was Tiffany, her voice shaking. Margaret, please don't do this. I can't cook for 25 people. The third message almost made me laugh. Why is the refrigerator empty? Some of you listening might recognize that moment. The moment when someone finally realizes how much invisible work existed all along. At 7:15 a.m., a new message arrived. This one was from a voice I hadn't heard before. Mrs. Margaret, this is Alejandro, Tiffany's uncle. Our flight arrived early and we are on the way to your house now. Perfect. Everything was happening exactly as planned. I poured myself another cup of coffee and stepped out onto the balcony. Somewhere across the city, 25 guests were about to arrive at a house with no breakfast, no decorations, and two very unprepared hosts. But the real surprise waiting for them had nothing to do with food. Because by the end of that day, Tiffany's family would discover the truth about her finances, and Christmas dinner would turn into something else entirely. A reckoning. The doorbell. At exactly 8:02 that morning, the doorbell rang. Kevin later told me the sound felt louder than usual, not because the bell had changed, but because the house behind that door was completely unprepared. No breakfast, no decorations, no welcoming table. Just 25 guests arriving with suitcases and expectations. Alejandro was the first to step inside. A tall man in his 60s, calm and composed, the kind of person who notices everything without raising his voice. Behind him came Valeria, then Marco, and several others Tiffany had proudly promised a perfect Christmas. Kevin tried to smile. Welcome. Please come in. But Alejandro immediately looked around the living room. No Christmas tree. No decorations. No food. His eyebrows slowly lifted. Tiffany, he said carefully, I thought you said Margaret organized these gatherings. Tiffany forced a laugh. She had to leave suddenly. Alejandro nodded once. Interesting. Then he placed his suitcase beside the door and spoke again. In that case, perhaps we should discuss the documents she sent us. Kevin froze. What documents? Tiffany's face turned pale, because in that moment, her Christmas celebration quietly transformed into something else entirely. A family meeting. And the subject of that meeting was her. The first crack. Kevin later described the room as strangely quiet. 25 people stood in the living room, yet it felt as if the air itself had paused. Alejandro opened a folder. Inside were printed bank statements, credit cards, loan documents, numbers that were impossible to ignore. Tiffany, he said calmly, would you like to explain these? She stared at the papers like someone seeing them for the first time. That must be some misunderstanding. Valeria stepped forward. It isn't. Her voice carried a quiet authority. I verified the accounts this morning. Kevin looked from one face to another. What accounts? Alejandro handed him the papers. Kevin's eyes moved slowly down the page. The silence stretched longer. Then he whispered something that changed the entire room. These cards are in my name. Valeria nodded. Yes. Kevin looked at Tiffany. When were you going to tell me about $50,000 in debt? Tiffany opened her mouth. No sound came out. Some of you listening may recognize that moment. The moment when a carefully built story suddenly begins to collapse under the weight of truth. But the real shock had not even been revealed yet. The truth expands. Kevin sat down heavily on the sofa, still staring at the documents. I never opened these accounts, he said slowly. Valeria nodded again. We know. Alejandro folded his hands calmly. Tiffany used your credit information. The room erupted. Voices everywhere. Questions. Shock. Anger. Tiffany tried to speak. It wasn't like that. But Alejandro raised one hand. Please stop. His voice was calm, but firm enough to silence the room. For years you told this family a very specific story. He gestured toward the house. That Kevin was financially successful. That Margaret was wealthy. That everything here was stable. Valeria added quietly. And that Margaret planned to leave this house to you one day. Kevin looked up immediately. What? Silence answered him. Tiffany's lie had reached further than anyone imagined. Alejandro continued. You borrowed money from relatives based on that story. Kevin's face turned white. How much? Valeria didn't hesitate. Over $20,000. Across the room, someone muttered something under their breath. The perfect Christmas Tiffany had promised had turned into something very different. A full family reckoning. And somewhere across the city, sitting quietly in a hotel overlooking the ocean, I was about to receive the phone call that confirmed everything. The call that changed everything. My phone rang at 10:30 that morning. I had been sitting on the balcony of my hotel suite, watching the ocean move in long, patient waves toward the shore. For the first time in years, the quiet felt peaceful instead of lonely. When I saw the caller ID, I already knew who it was. Alejandro. I answered slowly. Mrs. Margaret, he said. His voice carried the tone of a man who had just discovered something unpleasant. I believe my family owes you an apology. I rested my elbow on the table beside my coffee. I'm listening, I said. There was a pause on the line, and I could hear voices in the background. Then Alejandro continued. The documents you sent us were accurate. Unfortunately, they were only part of the story. That did not surprise me. Tiffany has been borrowing money from several relatives, he said. How much? I asked quietly. Over $20,000. The wind moved across the balcony. And Kevin? I asked. He knew nothing, Alejandro replied. He's in complete shock. For a moment I closed my eyes. Kevin had always been a good boy. But sometimes good people look away from problems because they trust the wrong person. Alejandro spoke again. There is something else you should know. I'm listening. Tiffany told several members of the family that you plan to leave her your house. I almost laughed. Interesting. That promise, he continued, was used to secure loans. The silence between us stretched for several seconds. Then Alejandro said something that changed everything. This Christmas gathering is no longer a celebration. It has become a family intervention. A son finally sees. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Kevin. His voice sounded different. Quieter. Older. Mom, he said softly, were you the one who sent those documents to Tiffany's family? Yes. The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Then Kevin exhaled slowly. I should have listened to you sooner. I watched the ocean while he spoke. You weren't ready, I told him gently. I didn't want to believe she could lie like that. That's understandable. Kevin hesitated. They showed me the credit cards, he said. Yes. And the loans? Yes. Then his voice dropped even lower. They also discovered she opened 2 accounts using my social security number. Identity fraud. The words were heavy even when spoken quietly. Kevin sounded like someone walking through the ruins of his own life. I feel like I don't know my wife, he admitted. Some of you listening may understand that feeling. The moment when the story you believed about your life suddenly stops making sense. Trust doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it simply collapses. Kevin, I said carefully, what happens next is up to you. I know. He was quiet again. Mom. Yes? When are you coming home? I looked out over the water. Tomorrow, because some conversations cannot happen over a phone. Some truths need to be spoken face to face. And after 5 years of silence, it was finally time. Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve morning arrived cold and bright. The taxi dropped me in front of my house just after 10 o'clock. The driveway was crowded with rental cars. Suitcases stood near the front door. Voices filled the living room. But the moment I stepped inside, everything stopped. Kevin stood near the window. He looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept all night. Behind him stood Tiffany. Her hair was uncombed. Her eyes were red. For the first time since I met her, she looked small. Alejandro stepped forward first. Mrs. Margaret, he said respectfully, it's an honor to finally meet you. I shook his hand. Under better circumstances, I hope. Before anyone could speak again, the doorbell rang. Kevin opened the door. Robert Miller walked inside carrying a briefcase. My lawyer. Tiffany stared at him immediately. Why is there a lawyer here? I placed my purse calmly on the table. Because, I said, After 5 years of silence, I decided it was time to protect myself. Some of you listening understand that moment. The moment when someone finally stops asking for respect and starts requiring it. If that idea resonates with you, remember something important. Strength doesn't beg, it builds. Subscribe. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones who change everything. And what happened next proved exactly that. New rules. Robert opened his briefcase and placed several documents on the table. The first matter concerns the property, he said. Kevin looked confused. What about the house? Robert spoke calmly. Mrs. Margaret has transferred ownership into a family trust. The room fell silent. This legal structure ensures the house cannot be sold, mortgaged, or used as collateral without her direct consent. Kevin nodded slowly. That makes sense. Tiffany said nothing. Robert continued. There are also new residency conditions. Her head lifted suddenly. What does that mean? I answered before Robert could. It means things are changing. I stepped closer to the table. For 5 years, this house slowly became a place where I worked instead of lived. No one spoke. That ends today. I looked directly at Tiffany. You will visit this house by invitation. You will not host events here without asking. And you will never again treat me like staff in my own home. Kevin lowered his head. I'm sorry, Mom. Alejandro spoke quietly from across the room. Respect should never require legal documents. He was right. But sometimes boundaries only become real when they are written down. The quiet kind of victory. By the time evening settled over the house, something had changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. The tension that had filled every corner of the living room that morning had slowly faded, replaced by something quieter. Conversations were softer now, movements slower, as if everyone inside the house had suddenly become aware of something they had ignored for far too long. Truth has a strange way of doing that. Some of Tiffany's relatives decided to leave early. Their suitcases rolled quietly across the hardwood floor, the sound echoing faintly through the hallway. A few stayed, mostly sitting together in the living room, speaking in low voices. No one mentioned Christmas dinner anymore. The holiday had turned into something else entirely. Reflection. Tiffany spent most of the afternoon sitting silently on the edge of the sofa. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her posture small in a way I had never seen before. For the first time since she entered my life, she looked less like someone in control and more like someone finally confronting the consequences of her choices. Kevin moved through the house differently, too. At one point, he quietly brought 2 cups of coffee to the table where I was sitting. He didn't say anything at first. He simply placed the cup in front of me. A small gesture. But after 5 years of silence, small gestures carry weight. Later that evening, Alejandro stood beside me near the window. Outside, the first snow of the season had begun falling softly over the streetlights. You handled this with remarkable dignity, he said. I watched the snow for a moment before answering. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I paused. I simply stopped accepting disrespect. That's the thing people often misunderstand about moments like this. They expect anger. They expect revenge. But the most powerful victories are rarely loud. Sometimes the greatest act of strength is simply deciding that your dignity is no longer negotiable. And once that decision is made, everything else begins to fall into place. If that feeling sounds familiar to you tonight, then you already understand something important. Quiet strength is still strength, and places like this exist for people who believe dignity matters. Real power moves in silence. Subscribe. And before you leave, I'd really like to hear from you. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And tell me honestly, if you had been in Margaret's place, after 5 years of being treated like a servant in your own home, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have walked away much sooner? Because stories like this travel across continents for a reason. They remind us of something simple. Respect may disappear for a while, but dignity always waits patiently for the moment we decide to reclaim it.